Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program's Homeowner Webinar Series. My name is Jen Marvin. I'm the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Statewide Coordinator. Today we have Laura Vasquez speaking on Introduction to Efficient Irrigation. Your microphones have been muted. If you have questions, please type them into the chat box and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Please stick around until the end of the presentation to take the survey. It helps me give you the kind of programming you like and lets us know how we're doing. Our next presentation will be December 7th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on native plant propagation. So let me introduce our speaker. Laura Vasquez has been a part of the IFAS Miami-Dade County Extension Office for 17 years and was recently appointed as the Residential Urban Horticulture Agent and Master Gardener Coordinator. She earned a bachelor's degree in education from Florida International University. She is accredited Florida Friendly Landscape Certified Professional, Florida Water Star Irrigation Professional, and Certified Green Industry Best Management Practices Instructor. Her field experiences range from research and sampling to mapping and developing educational programs and presentations. Laura was also instrumental in the creation and development of the Landscape Irrigation Rebate Program, a water and sewer entity working through Extension Office and educating homeowners, contractors, and property managers on water use efficiency. So with that, Laura, why don't you take it away?
Well, good morning, everybody. Host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, hold on. Okay, you should be good now.
Okay. Let me see. Let me know if you guys can see that.
Yes.
Am I up? Okay. Perfect.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Laura. I have been with the University IFAS Extension for about 17 years. I started working with the Florida Yards and Neighborhoods Program, which now is the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. It's one of the entities under the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. So today I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about Introduction to Efficient Irrigation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Extension Office. We have about 67 extension offices throughout the state. We have 12 research stations also throughout the state. And our job at Extension is to disseminate the information from the university and the research to the community. Predominantly, we do that here in Miami-Dade through the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program as well. This presentation fits under our second principle, which is watering efficiently. I don't know if you, how many of you are familiar with our Florida Friendly Landscaping principles. If you have been attending most of these, this webinar series, you may be familiar with all 9, which is right plant, right place, watering efficiently, fertilizing appropriately, mulch, attracting wildlife, managing your pests responsibly, recycling your yard waste, reducing stormwater runoff, and protecting the waterfront. Like I mentioned, today we're going to focus on our second principle, which is watering efficiently, and all these different points that we'll make within how to make your system more efficient. So basically, as Jennifer mentioned, I am in Miami-Dade. So this webinar is being done, you know, I know there's many people from different counties around the state. This is going to focus more within Miami, just because, you know, this is where we're located, and we do have very different soils here from other locations in Miami-Dade. So people typically move to South Florida because they want a lush landscape, they want the tropical look, and they can achieve this and not have to water every day. That's something that we battle with all the time, trying to teach our homeowners that you don't need to over-fertilize, overuse pesticides, or overwater, and you will have the ability to have this type of landscape. As many of you guys know, overdevelopment is a huge issue in the state of Florida. You can see here, this is what our state is currently. I think Miami-Dade should be a little bit darker now. Homestead has been overbuilt, or has had a lot of development in the last couple of years. This is what we're predicted for 2060. You can see all the red area, which is development land. So this is what we're fighting against. Again, in Miami-Dade, our water comes from the Biscayne Aquifer. It starts here in Lake Okeechobee and runs underneath the ground. And many of there's about 3 or 4 counties that share that same Biscayne Aquifer. So I think it's part of Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, Monroe. We send water to Monroe. We ship water to Miami Beach and also to Key Biscayne. So that's important because if we're not able to refill the aquifer, then we have issues with water, having the availability for water for us to use to drink. In Florida, we have about 50 to 60 inches of water, which is about 4 to 5 feet of water. And so this, sometimes I always have this question, well, why do we need irrigation if we have so much water or so much rain every year? Well, ideally, if you look at this graph here, this is the monthly rainfall that we have, particularly in the summer. As you guys know, our rainy season is May through October. You can see how high the rainfall is here, but also ET is very high. So because the evapotranspiration is very high, we do need the additional irrigation to compensate for what's been evaporated and what the plant has not been able to take up. Typically, we do very well in the winter. Lately, it's been raining. Even the last couple of days down here in Miami, we've had some, a couple days of rain. But our worst month is in April. So right before the rainy season is when we end up dealing with a lot of drought issues. Last year, the South Florida Water Management District did determine that we were in abnormally dry conditions near Miami-Dade County. So this is when we have most of the clients coming to our program because they are, showing, or their landscape is showing signs of stress. But if you're watering your grass or your landscape appropriately throughout the year, your turf and your plants will overcome the drought situation a lot better if you're watering appropriately. Again, this is an issue that happened last year. They do end up giving us stricter rules when we end up in drought situations. Here, they actually changed the time that we were allowed to water during the month of April. But all this can be compensated. If, like I mentioned, if we're doing the right practices or we're using best management practices with our irrigation systems, then that's something that we shouldn't have to be too concerned about. So the 3 things that we're looking at is design, management, and maintenance of your irrigation system. These 3 things will help you promote healthy plants, reduce the need for fertilizer and pesticides, and it's going to save you water in your landscape. So what are the basic parts of an irrigation system? So you have your sprinklers, the piping, the controller, the valves, whether it's electrical or indexing valve, your weather device, which is your controller, your backflow prevention device, and some homeowners have irrigation submeters. So your submeter is just a meter that separates your home usage from your irrigation usage. We're going to go a little bit into each type of sprinkler. What I want you to note is the amount of water or inches that these sprinklers put down. So these are your typical sprays, which we, you should use in your bedding plants, and those typically give about 1 to 2 inches per hour. They are affected by the wind and evaporation. Your rotors give about 1/2 inch to 1 inch per hour. These are more efficient. They do have larger droplets, and they're used predominantly for turf areas. The issue here in Miami-Dade, when we go out and do irrigation assessments, is that we typically see both of these sprinklers in the same zone or in the same section. And why is that a problem? And as if you can see, if we go back, your sprays again are giving 1 to 2 inches per hour, and your rotors give about 1/2 inch to 1 inch per hour. So what happens when you have those 2 in the same zone? You don't have equal application rate, right? So one is giving more water than the other. Typically, your rotors need about 30 to 40 minutes to put down a good 1/2 inch, or this 1/2 inch, you need about 30 to 40 minutes. And if you're running your sprays at the same amount of time, you're gonna be applying too much water where your sprays are located. This is a multi-stream nozzle. These apply water very similar to a rotor. Their performance is more efficient, also with low pressure, and they have less wind deflection. So, you know, typically we say when you're designing an irrigation system, you should have your rotors on one zone and your sprays on another. But sometimes, you know, you're inheriting an irrigation system and it's difficult to try to break up your irrigation system into more zones. What you could do in this case would be to replace your sprays, which are these, with these multi-stream nozzles if you have them in the same zone with the rotor. The reason being is because these apply water similar to a rotor, so it's good to have them in the same zone if you are, you know, that it's a cost-effective way to replace the sprays in your irrigation system. Micro sprays, we put this in here. Typically, these are not seen a lot in home landscapes, except for maybe your vegetable gardens or in your orchids. But this is important to point out that micro sprays give out gallons or inches per hour. So they do apply differently from your spray and your rotor. So when you have them in the same zone, you have to remember that they're giving out different gallons per minute as well. So this is your typical drip. A lot of contractors that we deal with, or landscapers, are not too, especially down here in South Florida, they're not too happy with us, you know, or homeowners installing drip, because if you are using well water, they tend to clog. But we recommend drip to be used more as a temporary irrigation. They're more efficient because they're giving water directly to the root zone of the plant. It also does gallons per hour instead of gallons per minute, which is what your sprays and rotors give. They do have issues with clogging, like I mentioned, and again, it's temporary irrigation. You don't want to, if you're using plants that are that do very well in your climate or in your county, they should be well established once you get the drip in and are watering them with the drip, and then you're able to remove the irrigation, and they should do well in your area if you're using the right plant in the right place. So drip versus soaker. These we tend to see a lot in landscapes. There is a big difference. So your drip, like I mentioned before, it's giving water directly to the root system. Your soaker kind of sweats throughout the entire length of the tube. But what happens is when the pressure is really high in your system, then this is giving out a lot more water than what's indicated on the manufacturer specification. So it's important to know how much pressure is running through the system so that you know how much water is coming out. So the drip is a little bit more efficient, I believe, than your soaker hose. Pressure regulated spray heads. This has been, Dr. Dukes has done research on pressure regulated heads. So when you install these bodies or these body types in your sprinkler system, they tend to keep the pressure regulated throughout the zone. Which allows for water saving. So if you can see here, based on his research, testing the pressure regulated spray bottle bodies resulted in flow rate reduction of 10 to 24% at 1.5 gallons per minute. So it's important to also have the bodies of the sprinklers so that they regulate this, you know, the entire zone. So when you're adding sprinkler heads, the more sprinkler heads you add in your zone, the more you're reducing the pressure in that particular zone. So these heads will allow you to keep, you know, the pressure regulated throughout the whole entire section. So what's wrong with this picture? Now that we talked a little bit about it, can anybody tell me, maybe in the chat, what's wrong with this photo based on some of the things that we talked about in the slides previous? Anybody can tell me in the chat what's wrong with this photo here? Yes, overlapping sprays is one, because they're watering the same section, mixed sprays, overwatering, overlap, watering sodden trees. Yeah, that's a good point. There's mixed plantings, but yes, kinds of heads. So again, different head output in the same zone. Exactly, Terry. So what we're looking at here is, again, we're talking about that the rotors and the sprays have different application rates. So if you're running this area to water the grass for your 30 to 40 minutes to get a 1/2 inch which is what Dr. Dukes and the university recommends. Half an inch of water every time you water. You're going to run this for 30 or 40 minutes to get the half an inch in your grass. And then these areas where you have these sprays are could give out double that amount. And it is also overlapping and watering the same area. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you have, that you have your sprinklers watering the area that's needed. Okay, so here's another review question. Can somebody tell me what's the difference between your spray here and your drip irrigation here? What was one of the biggest differences between your sprays and your drip or soaker hose? Output, correct, Stacy, output amount. Again, we're talking about gallons per minute versus gallons per hour. Smaller droplets, that's true. The sprays have smaller droplets, so you have more wind deflection. Drip is more efficient. It's giving water directly to the roots. But the main point is the fact that you have different amount of water that's that you're giving out per minute versus per hour. So if you're using sprays correctly, let's say you have your sprays just in your bedding plants, which you should, and you run them for about 10 minutes. Typically, these heads can give out 3 gallons to 5 gallons per minute, right? So if you're running them 15 minutes, 3 to 5 gallons per minute, that should be sufficient for that area. However, if you have drip in the same zone, these give out gallons per hour. It could give out 1 gallon per hour, 3 gallons per hour. So then we're going to have an uneven application rate within the system. So it's important to know what type of sprinklers you have, how much they're giving out, at what rate they should be performing their, at their maximum performance. So irrigation zones should be based on plant types. As we mentioned, these are called hydro zones. So your grass should be typically on its own section. It is what needs the most water. Your shrubs, trees, and ground covers, once they're established, again, you don't need that much water for them. Maybe in April here in South Florida, when we do have a really dry season, it's important to give them, just supplemental irrigation. But if you're using the right plants in the right place and you're using plants that are Florida friendly, they should be able to deal with the drought conditions that we have, especially like, a mild drought. Another point to make is when you're installing irrigation or designing your irrigation system, that you kind of need to look at what you're watering in that particular area. Here, I was very surprised. I came down to the Lowe's here in Homestead, and they had perennial peanut and all these great plants. They had some coonties and some cardboard palms. And I said, wow, somebody's finally listening. These are the types of plants that we should be using down here. But again, they have irrigation. So irrigation should only be used for the establishment of these plants. But these areas are very difficult to water. You see these curves here. These are difficult to water without having, a lot of runoff. If in this picture here, this was a property that we visited for an irrigation assessment, and this property had no idea they even had irrigation here. So the water was flowing over the edge, and they were wondering why the sidewalk was wet every morning. It was because they had no idea they had irrigation here. So it's important to know, do we need irrigation here? Are there plants that you can put here that you could establish with just a drip system, where you can tie into maybe one of the heads here, run a drip line, get them established, and then you don't have to worry about watering that area. So again, some areas are hard to water to irrigate without overspray, and consider using plants that do not require irrigation. Also, another great point is when you're designing or you have your irrigation system or you're making changes to your irrigation system, is to make sure that you have head-to-head coverage, which means that the water from this sprinkler should reach the other on the other side and vice versa. So you should have an overlap of water within your sprinkler systems, because this provides better uniformity in your system. So you could do your triangle spacing, or you can do your square spacing. And you want to make sure, again, that you have match application rates throughout the zone. So if this section, you're going to use all heads that are using 3 gallons per minute or putting out 3 gallons per minute at, let's say, 30 PSI, because that is what your system is pushing out in that zone. all of the heads here should be comparable. They should all be the same type of head, just looking at different patterns if needed. If you don't need a 360 because that area only needs a 180, the patterns can be different. However, making sure that you have matched application rate is very, very important. Sometimes when you have a broken head, you're like, oh, I have a spare in the garage, or your landscaper says, oh, I have one in the vehicle, and they pull out a head and they just replace it. Sometimes that can cause more damage because it could be a head that is not suitable for that area. So it's very important that you know what head they're replacing, a broken head or in that particular area. So what we want to do is have a uniform system, right? Or have uniform application of water. So these are just different examples. This happens when you don't have proper spacing or you have maintenance issues. You know, you have your plants that are receiving the appropriate amount of water, but then you can have a plant here that's not receiving enough. And that could be due to, you know, either uniformity, design, maintenance. And what we're shooting for is to have, you know, your adequate irrigation in the root zone of your plants. So if you're watering 2 days a week, at least in South Florida, you're watering 2 days a week and you're shooting for that ½ inch every time you water, that should be sufficient for your plants and even your grass. A lot of homeowners don't believe us when we tell them that that should be enough for your grass, but it is basically enough. It will be enough for what your grass needs. So this is just an example of bad design. Typically, you know, some homeowners will see a dry spot, and instead of turning on the irrigation system, we, you know, just give or put more time on that particular zone. You know, I've asked this question to many homeowners. When you see a dry spot, what is it you do? It's like, well, I'll go to my controller and I just give it 10 more minutes because I know that that area is dry. But it could be a bad design issue. It could be, you know, here's an example. It could be an issue with uniformity because of pressure. It could be that you don't have enough pressure in the line. This is a study that was done at the university showing, you know, the issues that you have when you don't have enough pressure and the areas are dry, and when you don't have head-to-head coverage. The other issue could be with uniformity, could be maintenance. You know, a lot of the times your sprinkler system, your sprinkler heads pop up, and sometimes they don't pop back down. So what happens is your landscapers come with the mower, or you're out there mowing, and instead of pushing the heads down before you run the mower, you kind of just run over the sprinkler heads. And a lot of the mowers that we know, they don't get off the mower, or landscapers, they don't want to get off the mower to push the heads into the ground. And what happens is you start to cause a lot of issues with maintenance. So this area here that's dry is caused by this sprinkler that is not, it's not properly applying water because it was damaged during one of the routine maintenance. So the important thing there would be to always try to do a wet check. So before you decide to turn on the irrigation system, or before you decide to turn up your irrigation system for more time, it's always important to do a wet check. You want to turn on the irrigation system, walk the zones, make sure that you have, proper coverage. And how you can do that is doing this typical or basic catch can uniformity test, right? So that this test will give you two pieces of information. One, whether your system or your layout, if you have uniformity within your layout, and two, your application rate. So if you don't have any of these cans, what you can do is, if you guys have any cats or you like to eat tuna, you can save the tuna cans or the cat food cans, and you can place them within, it would be better to put them within 4 sprinklers, 3 or 4 in an area, and put them out and run that zone for about 15 minutes. In those 15 minutes, after those 15 minutes, you're going to go back out and you're going to measure the water in each can. You can either do it with a ruler, or if you have a little beaker at home or a measuring cup, you can measure how much water you're getting throughout the system or in that particular zone. If you have more water in one area, like let's say here, closer to the sprinkler, and you don't have enough water on this side, then it could be that you have an issue with head-to-head coverage. You see here, there's only 1 sprinkler on this side, so you're going to get more water here versus on this other side. So you would see that you don't have uniformity in the system. The other good thing is that if you're running it for 15 minutes and in the catch cans, you're getting that 1/2 inch, then you know that you only need to run that zone for those particular 15 minutes. If you're not getting the 1/2 inch within those 15 minutes, then you know that you need to run that section a little bit more, just so that you can get that good 1/2 inch that you'll need in that area. So this, this test can provide you both pieces of information. We do have a YouTube video that was filmed by Michael Gutierrez, who now works at Broward County, with Broward County, and Mary McCready put together this video that can tell you how to calculate your run times for your irrigation system as well when you're doing a catch can. So I'll send that link out for you guys to watch that video as well. That will help you out. So irrigation management, what's important to know with irrigation management? Well, you want to know the system. You need to know your plant requirements. Again, application rate is important, and routine maintenance. So everything needs maintenance. Even a Florida-friendly landscape needs maintenance. So I always say, having a Florida-friendly landscaping doesn't mean having no maintenance. It's just low maintenance, right? So everything needs maintenance, even your irrigation system. So based on IFAS recommendations, you're looking for that 1/2 inch of water, which we've talked about, for your irrigation system. When like 30 to 50% of turf starts to show signs of wilt, you want to make sure that you're giving it that good 1/2 inch that it needs. Again, it's really important not only to try to calculate the irrigation time right based on that 1/2 inch, but it's also really important to know the soil type of where you live. In Miami-Dade County, I'm in Homestead. The soil here is very rocky, very loamy. So you wouldn't program your irrigation system the same amount of time in Homestead that you would in like North Miami, because North Miami has sandier soils. In Cutler Bay, which is just east of us, they have very mucky soils. So you have to kind of understand that your soil, you have to understand the water holding capacity of your soil. So you're not going to run your irrigation system the same time you would down here as you would further north, because the soil doesn't hold the same amount of water. So it's important to, leaching is very important. It's important to know how much water your soil can hold before it starts to run everything off, because there is no filter from our irrigation systems running into our drains and out into our bays and our drinking water. So it's important that you're applying the appropriate amount so that we don't have major runoff. So what are other ways to determine your application rate? So you can install a smart controller. That would help you with your application rate. We'll go a little bit into that. We have our fawn weather station. If you have a basic digital timer, you can always use the fawn weather station and put in all your information of your irrigation system, and it will send you a report, with your current rain or with current rain conditions on how you should be running that irrigation system. The university also has your turf application that you could use. You can download that on your smartphone. Again, we talked a little bit about your catch can test. You can use your water meters. If you have a sub meter, that can help you determine your application rate as well. Other usable devices are your soil moisture sensors and your rain sensors. So we'll talk about a few of these in the next coming slides. So these are your irrigation controllers. You have your ET, which is evapotranspiration controllers, which is now we just call them our smart controllers. You have your rain sensors in Florida. It is, it is by law, you have to have a rain sensor installed on any irrigation system. And then we also have our soil moisture sensors. Soil moisture sensors work very similar to a rain sensor, and we'll get into a little bit of that. This is one that's wired. This was brought out very, very early on. I know Dr. Dukes also did research on these Acclima soil moisture sensors, but now we have wireless soil moisture sensors that you can install in your landscape. These were our original smart controllers or ET controllers that came out, which are standalone units. So they kind of get the information of what's going on that particular property in order to apply adequate irrigation run times. So it takes temperature, it takes the information on how much it's rained, and it starts to calculate what it should be running that particular zone for. But with everything going smart, we now have these smart irrigation controllers that run on Wi-Fi. I kind of like the older models where they're standalone units and they're telling you exactly what's going on your property, because in South Florida, we have a lot of issues where, like, my mom would call me. My mom lives like 10 minutes down the street from me, and she's like, oh, it's pouring down here. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's very dry. And so if these particular smart controllers get information from local weather stations, and this one is your Rainbird, and it has this link module that reads, it needs Wi-Fi access, so it reads from the weather stations back into the timer, as does Rachio and Hunter and these other smart controllers that are EPA certified. However, we want to test them as well to see how accurate they are in South Florida. I know that Dr. Dukes has done research with them in Gainesville. The other issue that we've run into is actually having access to Wi-Fi. The larger properties, homeowners don't have a lot of that, have those issues because they can tie into their Wi-Fi at home. But when we deal with large properties like homeowner associations and, you know, commercial size properties, like some warehouses down here in Miami that they want to join our large property rebate program, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later, they have issues with getting conductivity or getting the Wi-Fi to that system. So sometimes they have to purchase like a little hotspot, and they put it inside the controller in order to get the data to those particular timers. They do have bigger timers. SmartLink, like this one for large properties, can be run by a cell, like a cell cartridge, a radio frequency, or Wi-Fi. So they do have to pay a service fee. Homeowners, you wouldn't, because you're using a smaller device and you're getting your Wi-Fi information. But for larger properties, they do have to pay a service fee for getting that information into the controller. That's where we run into a little bit of problems with the homeowner associations, where they're, you know, having to add an additional service to their homeowner association fees. So here are just some pros and cons about some of these smart controllers. So some pros are that you have remote access. If you go away on vacation, you know what's going on with your irrigation system. It reduces runoff and it saves water. You don't have to worry about the internal batteries because it updates from your phone, and some of them keep historical data of irrigation. So if you're not sure, if your irrigation system came on, you can go back into the smart controllers and see what zone came on and for how long. Some of the cons that we've seen here is, you know, our South Florida weather, like I mentioned. How accurate are they here in South Florida? We are currently working with Dr. Biaville on trying to test some of these controllers. The ones that we see the most through our landscape irrigation rebate program, we're going to try to put them to the test, and not only test how they're working with our local weather stations here, but also how much they're reducing leaching if we compare it to a regular digital timer. Some of them forecast rain in inches, and others are applied in percentages. So that just basically means some will say, okay, it's going to rain half an inch, you don't have to water. Some of the controllers tell you, oh, we have an 80% chance of rain, which doesn't really give you a lot of information on how your system is going to water or how much is being applied to your zone. So I talked a little bit about rain sensors and how you have these are mandatory to have in your irrigation system, but it's also important to locate them in the proper place. You don't want to put them here where, you know, or on the overhang of your home where you're not getting any water. They need to be out in the open where there's no trees, nothing covering it, so that you can get the rain and make sure that you're not going to overuse your irrigation system. The rain sensor will shut off the system. It will not allow the system to come on if it has that good half an inch of water in the corks in these in the rain sensor. These now come wireless, which is great, because before they would have to run a long wire to your controller to make sure that you're able to locate it in a proper location. But now these come wireless, so you don't have to worry about paying that extra money to your landscaper or irrigation contractor to install these, because they are wireless now. So these prevent irrigation. They don't allow irrigation, but they prevent it from coming on. This is an old mechanical timer. This is still what we're seeing out there in a lot of the new developments. You know, hopefully we can move over to requiring the installation of smart controllers with the new development. I think Alachua County is working on that, is, you know, starting some requirements for new development to have a smart controller versus these mechanical timers, which are a lot cheaper, and the developers don't want to pay for the smart controllers. So we talked a little bit about soil moisture sensors. This is just a little rundown of how these work. You would put the soil moisture sensor in the ground in the first 6 inches of the soil. Again, they work similar to a rain sensor, but these are more effective because it's telling you exactly what's in the ground and in the root system of your plant. So you install them in the ground. You would put a bucket of water over the soil moisture sensor so it can get a good reading of how much water it needs to hold in that particular soil. So then you get your, you know, your rate of what your water holding capacity is. In the morning, let's say you had a sunny day and you know, it's been sunny for the last couple of days. The timer that you see here will send a signal out to the controller for the soil moisture sensor. And if it's really dry, then what it'll do is this latch will stay closed and it allows the water to come through the valve and out through your irrigation system. However, if it's been raining and the water, there's enough water in the soil, again, the timer will send a signal out to the controller for the soil moisture sensor, and it will not allow for contact in the irrigation system to run through the wiring and allow for irrigation. So that's kind of how these soil moisture sensors work. These are a lot more precise to me versus the rain sensor, again, because you're seeing what's going on in your soil in that particular property. But I'll ask you guys a question. If you guys were to install a soil moisture sensor in your landscape, where do you think it would be the best place to locate the soil moisture sensor? I'll give you guys a few minutes to answer in the chat. If you had a soil moisture sensor and you were going to put it in your landscape, where would be the best place to locate it or to install it? Okay, Douglas, open fields, open area without trees. Brian, that's correct. Turf, driest place in the landscape. That's right. In the driest place of the landscape. Why? Because if it's dry there, then you know that the rest of your irrigation, when the irrigation system comes on, it's going to be based on the driest area. So you're correct. Thank you guys for responding. Equal distance between two heads. Let me think. In whatever zone has most driest. Yes, Terry, it is in the area that is the driest of the irrigation system. Basically, it would be best to have one in each zone to give you a good idea, but that's, you know, that's a little bit of an overkill if you're just doing it mostly for your turf. But definitely would be in the driest area. This is a backflow. These are mandatory in your irrigation systems that are well water systems and I don't know if they're potable systems. So these are for potable irrigation, not potable, but for well water irrigation systems. You have to have these backflow preventers. These prevent contamination and going back into your well water. For those of you guys that are working with electricity, it's very important. This happens a lot. Every time we go out to look at valves, a lot of these electrical valves are flooded with water. You have to remember you're working with electricity, so it's really important that you guys are using these DBY connectors. They have grease inside these tubes so that you are being safe working with wiring if you guys are doing the work yourself. Or even if you're going in there to try to turn some of these on, again, your indexing valve, which are the ones that turn, it's the old valve that, you know, it turns into your different zones. This would replace that indexing valve. But if your timer were to go out, you can turn on these electrical valves one by one to turn on your different zones. So what happens is if you're in there trying to turn one on by hand, you want to make sure that you're protecting, that you're not dealing with live wires. Isabel said we have a lot of that on our community property. Yes, I can imagine so. That's another reason why it's important to do wet checks. Yes, you're relying on your landscapers and on your irrigation guys to do a lot of the wet checks and information like that, but it's good to be involved on what's going on. I know it's difficult sometimes, but just so that you can see that the wet checks are being done properly, throughout your irrigation system. Again, making sure that your filters, that you do maintenance on your filters. A lot of the water, like I mentioned here in South Florida, we have a lot of calcium in our water, so it tends to clog up a lot of the irrigation system. And if you're not cleaning out your filters, that's going to cause an issue. Typically here, whether you have municipal water, I mean, you really don't need the filter for, but again, groundwater, surface water, we do have some people here in South Florida that use lake water, or they tap into the canals. And so that brings a lot of debris with it, and you don't want it to clog up your sprinkler heads. So you want to make sure that you're using appropriate filters and making sure you wash them out. I've gone to a lot of properties where the filter, you can't even see the inside of the filter. It's completely clogged. So again, that it's not serving its purpose if you're not going in there and washing them out. Again, maintenance is a big issue. You want to make sure, again, if you have your company doing a wet check, it's important to walk your irrigation system. If you're a homeowner, just turning it on once a month, checking the zones, making sure that you're applying water appropriately and that you don't have any broken heads. This is the indexing valve that I was talking about before. A lot of the properties in Miami still have these indexing valves, which are not very efficient because sometimes they get stuck. What happens is when the controller comes on, this makes a turn on the inside and it opens up the valve on the bottom to the next zone. But sometimes these get stuck and they don't make the actual turn and you're watering the same zone over and over. So we recommend that you replace these with electrical valves, which I showed in the previous picture. Again, making sure that you replace or repair any broken lines right away. This happens a lot with drip, which is another reason why a lot of homeowners and landscapers are not too happy with drip, is because if you have them above the ground, sometimes you have, the landscapers come through, or, by mistake, you can do it and run the weed whacker over it, and then you end up having a lot of breaks in the system. So it's important to do regular maintenance because it does save water, money, and your plants in the long run. So I talked a little bit about us conducting irrigation assessments and going out and looking at properties. We have a program here called the Landscape Irrigation Rebate Program. Basically, we have homeowners who sign up to our program. We have a program for large properties and also single family homes. These single family homeowners sign up to the program. We go out and do an assessment of the irrigation system. We take a look at ways that they can make the system more efficient, and then we send them a free report. In that report, they can review the report. We will do a walkthrough with them on site and also talk to them about their plants and how they correlate, your plants and your irrigation work together. And so once we give them the report, they all decide what changes they'd like to make, and they can get a $500 rebate for up to $500, depending on what they change in their irrigation system. For large properties, their rebate is up to $2,850. But the stipulation for that program is that you have to install a smart controller. You can't do anything else if you don't install a smart controller into that irrigation system. But I wanted to show you guys all the different counties that already have this type of program. They're not all the same. It all depends on what your utility company or their partners are requiring them to do, or their funding agencies require them to do. So every program is a little different, but there are many programs throughout the state. If somebody's on here that does have an irrigation program and I have not mentioned your program or your logo is not up there, please send it to me. These are the ones that I'm familiar with, but there are different irrigation programs available, and all our services are free because we are with the university and the county. Our program is a free service. So I just kind of wanted to show you a little bit about what this looks like. So here is a before photo of a typical irrigation system that we see here in Miami-Dade. They have this indexing valve with this old mechanical timer. It is a well water system. So with well water, when you convert it over, you will need this pump start relay. So they did install a smart controller, the Rainbird, and then they put in this pump start relay, which helps with the conversion of power from the pump to the timer. And then you have the electrical valves. Now you got to make sure that when you're purchasing these smart controllers, you have all the components for it, because this Rainbird model, it's not smart without this link, this little Wi-Fi link that goes inside of it. Rainbird, for some reason, sells these as a separate unit. They sell the timer and then this link separately. So it's not smart without it. So you'll need to purchase that separately. So it's important that you know what makes your timer smart. It's important to research these controllers before you purchase them, or ask your local extension office. They should be able to assist you with some of that information. So this is just a typical before and after, but I also wanted to talk about our large property program. Gutierrez, Rainbird products also require the WR2 wireless rain sensor to be considered weather-based. So yes, Mike, you're right. So Rainbird products also require the wireless rain sensor. So depending on your county, I think, is that for you guys, Mike and Broward? You guys are requiring that in order for the controller to be rebated in your county? I'm gonna wait for him to respond to that. That's correct. Okay, so in Broward County, in order for you to get the rebate, you need the Wi-Fi link, the link module that's inside, and the rain sensor in order for you to get the rebate with that controller. So we did a study with the Fisher Island. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Fisher Island. This is an island here near Miami Beach. It was a two-phase project that we converted all of the timers on this island, except for the golf course. The golf course is still pending. But they had, I'll show you the controllers that they had. Let me see if I have it in the next picture. No, I don't have it. Okay, so they used to have these old timers from Rainbird, and they switched over to this EXP LME controller from Rainbird. They installed a weather station there to run all these controllers. They didn't do anything on the layout. All they did was switch all these controllers to smart. We combined some of the controllers when they had multiple, and we were able to connect them into one. They were able to merge some of the controllers. So I think overall we did about 19 controllers there. We did a research study with Dr. Biabil, and what we did was we pulled the data from the first phase, which this is phase 1. We pulled 3 years of information before they switched over to the smart controllers, and then we pulled 3 years of data after they installed the controllers. For phase 2, that was in 2015. In 2017, we were only able to pull, when we started doing the research project, we were only able to pull a year before and a year after because we started doing this in 2018. So just by switching the smart controllers and looking at their water use, Fisher Island's been able to save about 11.5 million gallons per year. And calculating that into what they're saving yearly on cost, they're saving about $17,000 a year on irrigation costs. Because it is an island, we are providing them with potable water, so the entire island is on potable water. They are considering moving their golf course to reclaim water. That's a new project that they're looking into, but our irrigation program isn't going to be able to fund that. I mean, we only give a small amount. Our amount of rebate would be a drop in the bucket for what they're trying to do, but it is good that they're trying to look into converting the water use for that golf course, because we know that golf courses are big water hoggers. So let me see the comments here. Let's see, somebody said, where do I find this information in St. Pete? Is it at the city or Pinellas County site? I think I would go with contact your Pinellas County Extension service, and they should be able to direct you to your program there. What program will assist you there? Is Palm Beach County helping homeowners with the cost of replacement and timer and smart controller? I'm not sure, Joyce, if they have that. I know they have a mobile irrigation lab there in Palm Beach County, but I don't know if they're doing rebates for that. But I would contact your Palm Beach County Extension Service and ask if they are familiar with the program in your area. Paulette said Fisher Island residents have enough money for anything. Well, I will give you some insight. When we went to Fisher Island, they were actually in the red on their water bills. So this was a big help for them. They do have a master association that works with their individual homeowner association. The good thing is that now they realize that they are overusing water and they are trying to do their best to conserve it. Also because they're an island. So anything that, if they're overwatering, everything that they use on their lawn and their landscape is leaching out directly into the ocean. So they are making strides to do better. So let's give them that at least. This is information on our local social media. If you guys want to stay in touch with our programs, again, if you guys are familiar with other programs that I did not mention throughout the county, please let me know. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. The chat is open. Let me ask Jennifer, are we just reading the chat or are we going to open it up?
Yeah,
I am in Melbourne.
We're just reading the chat.
Okay.
So, and I can do that for you if you'd
Perfect.
like. Or okay. Let's see. I'm in Melbourne Beach in South Brevard County and live on a golf course with our own HOA water treatment system. Who can I ask for a landscape irrigation analysis?
Brevard County. I don't know if they have a program. Again, I would try to reach out to your local extension office. A lot of these programs have been tied into the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program in some counties. So your extension office may have information on who you can contact and whether or not there's a connection with the university. Because, you know, again, this fits under our watering efficiently principle. We were able to tie it in. I know some counties, it depends, like in Broward County, I know they work or they have some information with the university, but they're not directly working with the university. They directly work with the county. But that extension office is familiar with the program, so they're able to work together.
Great. Will these slides be available after the webinar? No, but the recording of this webinar will be available on our website under resources and then homeowner website probably within 3 weeks. It'll probably be after Thanksgiving. So do we have any other questions? We have a thank you for the presentation. So
yeah, I'm also going to provide my email address. If you guys have any questions, you know, that you like answered, or, you know, you think of something, go ahead and send me an email and we can help you out with any of the questions, or I can provide you information on your particular extension office to make it a little bit easier for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, they want the link to the video for the catch can. Let me see if I can put that in the chat really quick. Thank you, Mike, for showing up. Mike actually helped us with that. And we were sad to see him go to Broward. Let me see if I can pull that up. If I provide that in the chat, Jennifer, that can go later, right?
I think they'll be able to see it on the replay, but we'll keep it up there as soon for a couple of minutes.
Okay, Gregory says, how many extension offices are there? There's 67, Gregory, in total. There's 67 extension offices. There should be one in each county, and there's 12 research centers. Please send links to supporting info in email after program. Love the entire series recorded. Oh, well, that's positive. I kind of got stuck in some of my slides, so. So it wasn't one of my best, but I got a little nervous there. Too many people online.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for explaining this to us and, being with us this morning. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. I'm happy to be here. And again, if they have any questions, they can reach out to me.
Okay.
And we can help them the best we can.
Great. Thank you. Have a happy holiday.
You too. Bye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye, everyone.